seriously, it's just great to be here with you.
Yes, I've missed you. You know, just the anticipation of this conversation has been extremely heartwarming. So,
I feel the same way, and let me just see here. No, it's wonderful. I miss Michelle. I'm sorry she couldn't be on as well.
yeah, she sends her love to both of you. Really have been feeling your presence in a very strong way, and I'm here as our ambassador.
Well, you're a fantastic ambassador indeed, and so we should be live, and if you're
Yes, I can click share on that. Okay, that's what
fantastic. All right, so let me give a very brief introduction. I cannot possibly do this man credit in an introduction, so I just I want to refer you. I've put on the Golden Civilization website and my personal website, Joel and Michelle's website on Facebook. And if you go on it, you're just going to be stunned by all the amazing things that they have accomplished in their just in recent times, and they've accomplished a huge amount in their lifetime. I am really blown away when I see everything that they've done. They've traveled the world. They've introduced mindfulness in the military, in the arts, in leadership circles, all over the world, in the Houses of Parliament. These folks, I mean, and I'm stunned because we're the same age, and people often ask me, where do I get my energy? Well, I don't think I hold a candle to Joel and Michelle Levey. And the only other thing that I'll add is the Dalai Lama also is a huge fan. And if you look on the site, they've done work with him as well as with major figures in both in the corporate world and in the nonprofit world, the government world, and in the mindfulness world. People everywhere speak highly of their work. So it's a great privilege and honor and a thrill for me to be with my friend here, Joel Levey. As we were saying, we don't see nearly enough of each other. Wonderful to be here with you, Joel.
Fantastic to see you and to be able to join you for this, George. You know, I'm so inspired by your work and your book, and you're definitely one of those deep kindred souls in this great awakening and transformation work, especially within kind of the heart of the mainstream, where we're both very engaged as operatives.
It feels kind of strange, like we're secret agents sometimes, doesn't it? Because we come so deeply from the mindfulness, from a meditative background, and there we are, right in the heart of the beast, basically.
Yeah, warmly welcomed. You know, it's like, I think, these VUCA times of just ever increasing volatility, uncertainty, complexity, ambiguity, and absurdity are leading so many people to just live on the edge of overwhelm and despair. And I think the wisdom and the medicine that we both carry is really a source of strength and inspiration for everyone we meet along the way. So there's a great receptivity to this work these days.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like you're just sharing my message as you share that, and I was curious what you had found as you travel the world. I mean, your website is filled with locations in countries really all over the world, in every continent. It's quite impressive with pictures of your gatherings of people to really make this transformation occur. I'm curious. We've as you know, you were really, I think, maybe the first people that reviewed my book, The Golden Civilization. And thank you very much for so doing. And you wrote a number of different paragraphs where you said, yeah, you could use this, or you could use this. And one of them was about leadership. Another one, I think, was about mindfulness and corporate world. I'm wondering what you're seeing. So you spoke of the kind of the despair and the trouble that people are finding. And you also spoke of the hope that we're bringing. What do you think is really happening right now, Joel? And what is the difference that you're intending to make, you're looking to make, and that you see that we might be making as well?
Well, You know, George, there's over $50 billion a year spent on leadership development around the globe. And yet 37% of leaders say that the work is not meeting their needs and it's not having the impact on their organizations they want. McKinsey published a study some years ago that said 70% of major organizational change efforts fail to meet their goals. There's just this incredible crisis in leadership where I think 18% of HR leaders say that their leaders are really adequately prepared to be highly functional in these, increasingly VUCA, complex, overwhelming times. So what we find is that wherever we go, there is such a deep listening and an openness for a deeper kind of wisdom, which your book speaks so deeply to, and your life has been a passionate call for. And I think, Einstein's insight that we are not going to find solutions to complex problems at the same level of consciousness that created those problems it makes such a business case for doing deeper wisdom work and developing the capacity of people to source from a deeper dimension of their being to bring forth the wisdom and the creativity, both at an individual level and a collective level. So it's just such a time of the flourishing of this work. I think the question is, will we go deep enough, wide enough, fast enough within the crumbling organizations that have been created out of a shallower wisdom that's clearly insufficient? Will we source a deeper wisdom quick enough to be able to bounce and to roll and to carry on in thriving and sustainable ways, or not?
Yeah. Fantastic. We're so aligned in this. I've got so many questions I could ask as you talk. One of the things that I thought a lot about is the entrepreneurial energy that is also part of this, and we see it in the corporate life. We mostly see it. It's mostly talked about at the business schools and in venture capital and private equity kind of formats. But what you're talking about and what I'm talking about is the leadership being entrepreneurial, coming from the base, coming from everywhere, and really infiltrating. And one of the things that stunned me is that we've had this explosion of not what you and I are doing, although we're part of this, but we've had this explosion, the Industrial Revolution 250 years ago starting, we've had this explosion of that's delivered longer lifespans, healthcare that actually does give us the ability to travel. Here, you and I are speaking across the globe together today, and just amazing things. And yet, you look at the hierarchies of power. I make this triangle to remember them. The hierarchies of power that are out there that you are engaging with and that I'm engaging with as well. Where in all of those hierarchies that are out there, whether they're government, corporate, or nonprofit, where do we find wisdom? At the top. And where is that wisdom so wise that it's actually filtrating all the way down, penetrating? And I think you and I feel very strongly that without that, we're cooked.
Yes. Absolutely. And I think, there are people, I think, in every domain of human endeavor that are searching for, praying for, seeking out different pathways to deeper wisdom, contemplative practices, plant medicine, prayer. It's just there's a great searching going on. I think there's also a great naivete with regards to the sophistication of that. And, when Michelle and I began this work in the 80s and myself in the 70s, the kinds of rollouts of the programs we do would be much deeper and enduring and just saturating the minds and the cultures of leaders and organizations. And now it's like the bandwidth of attention and time and resources looking into wisdom practices is like a thin veneer.
Wow.
in so many of the organizations, and it's such a light touch. But there are leaders in every realm that we meet that are thirsting to go deeper, and that's given rise to us doing year-long programs to develop the capacity of leaders in deeper kinds of ways. But boy, how to scale that and take that to a wider audience. It's the greatest opportunity and greatest challenge of our times, I think.
Yeah, I agree, and the whole notion of scale. Sometimes I think that the way we think of scale is largely comes from a profit model that is geared toward, again, a hierarchy of power, working toward profit rather than toward or from wisdom. And scaling, you can scale with things that can be broken into little pieces and then sold and moved around and all of that. Wisdom's a little different. And I wonder, thinking about that, just thinking about this scale problem, but deeper as well. Well, can you define wisdom? What would you put in if someone said, well, what is it?
Yeah, we've had the blessing for many years that our website is wisdomatwork.com, so we've been deep into the contemplation, whether it is, George, as I see wisdom, it's really a view of reality that's congruent with the true nature of ourselves and of things, and so that that view of reality can inform and inspire our actions, our endeavors, how we lead, the choices that we make, to be congruent with and in harmony with the way of things, with the Tao, with the true integrity of natural systems and human systems. That to the degree that wisdom is congruent with reality, then we will live in harmony and balance with that, rather than against the grain and creating disharmony and creating unintended problems that come back to bite us in the ass downstream, or to devastate our systems because those organisms that have been released into the environment, or those lending practices or whatever, are completely unsustainable and unwise. So to the degree that we're coming from wisdom, what we'll create will just allow us to mesh with reality in a way that flourishing and sustainability and compassion can flourish.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing, it's wonderful. And again, we're so aligned. And if that is Michelle nearby with your eye wave, I wave at her. Much love. I send her and bows.
Yes.
But you spoke about true nature and the Tao and integrity, and what I'm hearing in all of that, I'm hearing authenticity and our humanness. The depths of what it is to be a human being as being part of that, and that really needs to be at the depth everywhere throughout society, in every system, in every structure. And you and I are talking about leadership, starting with the leaders.
Yeah, and I think part of it is that it takes great courage to do this work.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is not for the faint-hearted.
Right.
It takes great courage to just sit and look into the cognitive dissonance and the craziness of our personal lives and our world, and to sort that out, and to let the kind of the lack of wisdom that we see at play open our hearts to a deeper kind of compassion and a deeper kind of analysis and sourcing of deep intuition and guidance to help us find new responses to the circumstances of our relationships or our lives or whatever. I think there's great promise, in the spheres that we work with, in working in the entrepreneurial world and the incubator world, of actually building new initiatives and new organizations wisely from the beginning, rather than going into these behemoth old structures that have been in place sometimes for hundreds of years, or dozens of years that are, just filled with incongruities and dysfunctions and norms that don't serve well, to start, really in a wise way, and to build teams of people with high integrity and access to deep wisdom. I think there's tremendous promise in that from our work over the years.
So I love all that you say, and one thing in particular, just to come back to your beginning in this last section, which is how much courage it takes, and you were talking in particular about the courage to do the deep practice that actually develops wisdom, and that speaks to the impossibility of the classical economic notion of scaling. Because it develops in here, and it takes work to do that. And we have Danny Goleman's wonderful book on in England they call it Altered Traits, which is just fantastic because it talks about how it actually builds those virtues inside of ourselves, the ongoing practice. I have one of the ways that I think of wisdom, sometimes coming down into a nutshell, is I think. And this is really deep in a way, pardon me for it, but it's that wisdom is the selfless understanding of the present moment and the impermanence that surrounds it. So to me, that's really being here and really being awake and being aware of all the stuff that could go on that shakes that. And to do that requires the authenticity that you're describing, the harmony, that being in the Tao, that kind of thing. And mindfulness, if nothing else, it's about learning to be present, learning to be here in that moment. So I have, well, go ahead.
Yeah, just one thought around that. It's like, if you look at the research on contemplative states and mindfulness and all these practices, that one of the things that they do is quiet the activity in the circuits in the brain that maintain the illusion of a separate self. Einstein referred to the optical delusion of consciousness that leads us to feel separate from the world rather than completely interwoven and interdependent. And so as we practice mindfulness, or contemplative prayer, or whatever these transformational contemplative practices are, it quiets that circuitry and that activity in the brain, like a little hamster cage that keeps going, saying, how am I looking at? Is this good? Am I sufficient? That ego chatter. As that quiets down, we become more transparent to the authenticity of our true, boundless, timeless, infinite wisdom self.
Yeah.
And at that level, that's where you see dynamic people engaged in noble endeavors and leadership that comes from a place of total selflessness and transparency, where the bottom has dropped out and our separate sense of identity, or me as an island, has kind of merged with substrate.
Yeah, lovely.
And at that level, when we tap into that more quantum or elusive or universal dimension, we're just a follicle in the larger body of life.
Yeah.
And we're both aware of transience and change and impermanence, but we're also grounded with a very authentic and awakened capacity in the sense of infinitude and timelessness, and that aperture of infinite wisdom is accessible to us.
Yeah, lovely. It's the paradox of what is delivered to people and delivered to you and me, to us from a mindfulness practice is quite extraordinary, and your languaging just reveals it in so many ways, because you talk about kind of the grounding and the kind of the wisdom piece, but at the same time you use language of being dynamic and being awake. And the thing that's been astonishing to me is how it wakes you up and makes you alert and energized, and at the same time you have this depth of that is selfless and kind of merging and aware of the much more of the virtuous realms that are available.
I
So
think this whole notion of interdependence, that each of us is a active node within the larger body of life, and that that the energy of our awakening and our care and our engagement can be dedicated to and ripple out through the larger body of life that we share. That we really hold that intention. I think right at the beginning of your book on page 7, you say, if we want a civilization that's universal, reaching out into all realms, we must start with profound respect for all living beings. And, to realize even in this moment that the two of you and I are talking, that there's a sense that, we're speaking to every living being and holding them in our minds and hearts and dedicating the goodness of what we might engage in here as a stimulus to like a light that we hold in the jewel of our hearts that might shine out and be reflected in the deepest jeweled heart dimension of all beings, as a stimulus to awaken, to open to a transparency, to a deeper wisdom.
yeah, beautiful, beautiful, Joel. Let me segue back to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, if I may, and come back to the mundane corporate and the challenges of the corporate world, where you and I know that the pursuit of profit, which has been, it's clearly the why wisdom doesn't develop, because you've got a single-minded purpose, and that purpose is making sure the numbers work, and then it's also breaking things down, the scale, the whole problem of scale. But one of the things that we know is that with that single-minded, without the wisdom, without the humanity coming in, that what happens in economic terms, the economists call the consequences negative externalities. So we have war that comes out, we have massive inequality, we have money controlling democracy, taking over democracy. So you have these things that were not intended as consequences. We have pollution and challenges of the earth. So coming back in a way to kind of what you and I are really trying to do in this moment, in the kind of the world that is out there functioning as an economic world, and perhaps a governmental and institutional world as well. What is it that needs to happen? I mean, to me, there's something at the base somehow of of how we've structured institutional life that is off. Because we don't find wisdom anywhere in terms of the structure. What do you think, and how can we deliver? My challenge: how can we deliver this golden civilization within a generation? How can we do that? What's required? What do we need to do?
Well, we start by gathering the allies. I think you and I and Michelle and I are strange attractors. That people, as they encounter our work, they watch this video, they read something that we've written or whatever, they see us walking down the hall, it gives rise to conversations, and there's curiosity, and to cultivate those relationships with the people that are really ripe and ready to go, and to help develop their capacities, knowing that there will be a ripple effect to that, that one of those people might be head of a division or a department or whatever, and to nurture and develop the possibilities inherent within that. I think that's one way to go. The other is, I remember we were facilitating a meeting for Intel. They were it was an acquisition of the best company in Denmark, fiber optic company, and it's like the Borg was coming in to assimilate this amazing little dynamic kind of organization that was so tight knit. And as at the beginning of that session, we said, just pause for a moment to consider how many people will be touched by the decisions that we make here in the next 4 years, in the next 4 days that we're together.
Yeah.
And one of the engineers said, 2.5, 3 billion people will probably be touched by the decisions we make here in this room.
Wow.
And one of the other engineers who's part of this little company said, yeah, and I wonder if we're creating the kind of world I want my kids to grow up in.
Wow.
So I think, how can we stimulate a deeper soul searching, a different questioning of mission and endeavor within senior leadership and within boards, that are, kind of squeezing down on how much profit can we get out of this? And if this CEO doesn't do that, then we'll take out that part and insert another one that might perform the function. I think there's a deep kind of questioning and soul searching that we need to, that we're wise to catalyze, to just say, what's the highest, deepest, most enduring and expansive function that we can realize, the purpose that we can realize for the greater good of all, and to, wherever possible, stimulate that conversation. When we meet people that we've worked with, we bump into somebody in an airport we haven't seen for 20 years or so, and we say, what stands out the most from the work that we did together in your division or your organization or whatever? The word ripples comes up again and again, that people really, really got that the heart and the core of this work are about the ripples of our influence.
Yeah.
Out through the market, through the world, for generations to come. What are we putting in motion here? And I think, just, it's pretty native, I think, to all beings to appreciate those ripples of meaning and value in the field of interdependence. How can we be creative and bold enough and tuned in enough to the nuances and the meaningful memes within an organization to invite that kind of deep questioning, and then facilitate and support people search for that?
Beautiful. Do you think that connection, those series of connections, I mean, you've been in this world doing this for decades, and you've seen things happen, and yet at the same time, you're seeing problems in the world arise that are getting more and more complex and feels out of control in many ways and chaotic. Is it enough, our individual impact? Do we have enough time? You brought that up earlier as well, to accomplish this, or do we need something like in the structure itself, because the structures just aren't delivering the wisdom in the structures of how we frame institutions? Do we need something? In the financial world, there's this argument about, should advisors be fiduciaries for their clients? And it causes great tension among the big factories, the brokerage houses, the firms that have broken things down into that are really going for profit primarily and are largely sales organizations. The people that are for a fiduciary standard across the industry, are generally client-centered people. But do we need that throughout corporate and institutional life, where there is an ethos that is required for us to be fiduciaries for our consumers, for our communities, for our employees, for the planet Earth, for democracy, for the freedom of the press, for the values that we have? Do we need something that is actually embedded in how we understand the structures of corporations and nonprofits and government?
I think that's certainly worthy of consideration. I think one of the most high leverage strategies at this time is to really, I think at some level, that human salvation depends on our capacity to develop our collective wisdom and intelligence. And I remember last time we were together at the Academy for
Contemplative and ethical leadership.
Contemplative and ethical leadership. I think we were both on fire with this vision of how to create these wisdom consortiums, within different industries and realms of endeavors that would develop the capacity of people, in a very entrepreneurial spirit, like Manhattan projects in different places, to take on huge questions and projects and develop the capacity of groups of people to source deeper collective wisdom, like developing vast telescope arrays that would gather photons of wisdom streaming from the ground of being, and that those deeper dimensions of the universe to inform us collectively, to supplement our individual wisdom with this collective deep intuition. We've had the opportunity to do that kind of work with R&D teams in some organizations, and it's been phenomenal. But I think to convene groups of highly motivated people, like psychonauts, ready to go into hyperspace of deep, deep wisdom and dedicated to developing the individual and collective capacities and protocols to do that. I think, funding endeavors like that and calling forth the people that really have a thirst and a wisdom for that kind of profound engagement for the benefit of all. I think, that is one domain that has been so overlooked, and that holds such vast promise for humanity in these times. And to combine, deep contemplative work with access to all the technologies that we need to do the research and to kind of, in a very iterative way, go deep into sourcing kinds of practices and wisdom practices, and then take it back out into the lab or back out into research, and then bring that back and just iteratively loop that for months and months at a time to find wise solutions to huge challenges we face. I think there's huge promise in that kind of deep work.
Yeah, it's essential. I'll just say it's so I can't imagine a sustainable democracy or a sustainable Earth without that kind of work, without having just as almost as a general practice. You go back to the Tibetans not having warriors, but instead having warriors of the spirit, where they 30% of their community became profoundly contemplative. We need that, and thank goodness we're building it. I think, and there's hope, and I want to say we're coming near the end of our time, and I want to say that it is that I'm hopeful here, sitting hearing you and knowing that we share so many of these ideas together and understandings together at a deep level. And I would love to do this again with you. I want to give you an opportunity to say any final words that you have, and also to say that any way that you and I can find to work together anywhere in the world. I'm traveling all over the world right now, just as you and Michelle have been, that it would be a great pleasure to work with you both.
That was exactly the thought in my mind as well. I don't know if you'll be in London later part of September, but we'll be there, and we'll be back in Europe 5 times over the year to come, because we have this learning expedition program going on there. People could find some information on that from our website, wisdomatwork.com.
Fantastic.
And then Hawaii as well. So I think we should just be intentional to see what we might co-host together, that might be a source of inspiration and blessings in the field of our influence in the world. We're both, so hooked up to so many people that are looking for some deeper opportunities for their own personal and organizational transformation. Our collaboration on that could be profound.
Be great. And I'll make sure I get you what my schedule is, so we can see if there's some opportunity for dovetail, and in the next year. That'd be fabulous. Fabulous, Joel. Anything else you want to say in closing?
I'll just put in an endorsement for some of our books. If people are interested, our Living in Balance book, is a treasure trove of inspirations for people in these times. And then we have another book, Mindfulness, Meditation, and Mind Fitness. Those are widely available and sources of inspiration. And I think also, in the larger view of this, how can we transform education, and bring up a a new generation of young people that are really equipped with the resources and the capacities they need to build a deeper resilience and deeper wisdom from an early age. You know, I began this this exploration when I was 15, and I think, and we're working a lot with young people and with schools and all that. So I think not to underestimate how profound an impact we can have by working with the upcoming generations of young people to equip them with deeper wisdom and resilience and mindfulness skills as well.
I do. You've brought up a topic that I have to add something, so we're going to go on another couple of minutes, and that is that one of the exciting things coming out of the book Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness is that we've created conversations that are structured group conversations that are happening all over the world. I've participated in about 40 of them, but there have been well over 100, and happening on 5 continents so far. And one of the and we try to get them to be ongoing so that they become a way that they are participative democracy, as well as building wisdom into a community. And one of the really fine groups that has had multiple returns, so they've come back 7 times,
Wow.
is actually crafting a manual for wisdom for children from age 6 to age 96. And then they're also working with institutional wisdom as well. So we're very much working in alignment with what you're seeing.
Fantastic.
And what is important. And we feel that that's really, you know, getting this wisdom piece out into the corporate world and in throughout our education feels absolutely critical. Thank you so much. Please, everybody who's here, not only go to Joel and Michelle's books, but go to their website and see what they've done. It's really phenomenal. As I said, it's I've put it on the Facebook page, all the Facebook pages I have right now. So
thank you. Yeah, wisdomatwork.com, and may the meme spread. You know, may your work flourish, and may all beings find pathways to source a deeper kind of wisdom and guidance in their lives and their work.
Fabulous. It's our time. It's time to do it. Thank you so much, Joel.
Thank you, George. May the ripples of our having had this conversation reach out into the world in vaster and more meaningful ways than we can imagine, and bring benefit to all beings.
Fantastic. I'm with you. Let's do it. Great, my friend. Love to Michelle, and hope to see you soon. Thank you.
I look forward to that. Thanks. Love to both of you too.
Thank you so much.